But I'm just going to ask you about the Curse of the Bambino. That one to me just kind of stood out. How did that documentary come about? And then overview, what was your final take on the entire documentary?
That was one of my favorite ones. Having been a Red Sox fan and going to games and watching games, and the 1918 chant became such a big deal and was such a an albatross for the Red Sox, and they had become really like a scarred team, and I don't know, it's like 2003, and Red Sox had begun to commit themselves financially to putting some good players on the field, and I forget how or why HBO said they wanted to do it, but I just kind of went in there and I said, this is a great story, and at the time we didn't quite know how to approach it, because I didn't want to approach it in a basic, standard, straightforward way. So I thought, well, it's kind of like a big cartoon, to me, and I figured I was never big on recreations. I always feel like they never really quite work, but somehow we just started noodling around with this Curse figure, this guy we would put in Fenway Park, and we would go back to him and have all this eerie music. And it was funny because you guys probably know Tom Stukas. He's a really good DP, and Brian Lockhart, who now obviously B-Lock is at ESPN. Brian was working with me on that show from he was like the art director. And so him and I went up to Fenway Park for a couple days, and we were like, man, when are we going to do this shoot? The weather was so bad. And finally we just looked at one another and said, we got to do it. It was pouring raining in Fenway Park the entire day. And somehow with that rain and the way that Tom shot that Curse figure, this shoot that we did, and that guy that we had, who was a college baseball player at the time, and we got this Babe Ruth uniform, and he had the swagger, like he was an athlete. So he kind of pulled off all the body language with the standing against the bat and swinging and doing all sorts of different things. And so that was really inspiring. We came back and we thought, geez, we can really make something interesting out of this. And Brian Keene, who's a composer that I've used many, many times through the years, came up with this brilliant theme, this Curse theme. And it was very kind of like Stephen King sort of like. And then we put the piece together, and I said to Ross at one point, I said, because he kind of let me go for a couple months, and we talked, and he goes, how's it going? I said, it's going good. He goes, well, who have you interviewed? And he was expecting me to reel off a whole bunch of players. And I said, the only player I've interviewed so far is Bucky Dent. I said, I'm just going to interview all fans. I said, this is a story about the Boston sports fans. This is not a story about, I don't want to interview Ted Williams or Yaz or Jim Longborg. This is their story. And at first, he had a fit. He's like,
yeah, I was about to say, I know he didn't take that.
No,
what? That wasn't his MO, right?
It didn't take him long to get it, and he wasn't overly resistant to it, but he was like, yeah, you sure about that? And I was like, yeah. I said, wait till you see this thing. And the fans just carried that thing. They were so passionate about what it was like to live their whole lives in families that had gone through year after year after year, being frustrated and coming close in 1986. And so it kind of worked. And then, you do these things long enough, and you guys have probably had this experience. It's just like this kismet moment. It's like almost opposite of the SI curse. Like I had such a great run. Like I do a film and like good things would happen. Like people would call me all the time and say, how did you know? How did you know? And in the next year they won the World Series.
Yes.
So it's like, geez, like what happened? So like I look back at that experience and it's like, man, there was just something so fateful about that whole thing. Like I got the opportunity to do this film at such a level, with HBO, and have such great people working with me on it. And then the following year they turn around. My son is 8 years old at the time, and he's just smitten with the Johnny Damons and Kevin Millars and Kurt Schilling. I mean, he's just so into the Red Sox, and to have that whole experience come to a head where they won the following year. Then, of course, 2 days after they won, I was like calling Ross. I said, man, we got to do a follow-up to this thing. So that's when the reverse of the Curse thing happened, and that was fun as well. But I appreciate you picking that one out because that was one of my favorites as well. But it was people didn't buy into the Curse thing necessarily because they had always attached Dan Shaughnessy to it, and Dan kind of runs hot and cold in Boston a little bit. You either love him or you hate him, and I happen to like Dan a real lot. But the whole Curse thing became something that people began to make fun of and dismissed, and rightly so. But I just felt like it was just such a warm knife through butter theme that we got to use it, because people outside of Boston will appreciate the story too, because it was so big, when it involved Babe Ruth and it involved, John F. Kennedy and people like, it was bigger than just a sports story,